Once again, it's 0 hour. I gotta stop doing this. Okay, so I had the entire video ready to go. I had it all filmed, I had everything. Then I realized how disjointed it was. Didn't make any sense. There's a lot of things that I want to talk about in this video, but the thing is that when you're trying to hit everything all at once, none of it makes sense. So that's why we're redoing this. What I'm getting at is, if this video sucks, that's why. So, I ended the last episode in a cliffhanger of sorts. I asked if esports are even worth it, and the short answer is yes. Yes, they are. The problem is explaining everything that goes along with that concept, and also explaining what it takes to be a sport. I ended the last show with an asterisk for a reason, and it was to note that that show assumed that nothing is going to change in the gaming industry, and why should they change? The money is rolling in, they're putting $11 million plus into a tournament, and they're still making bank, and they have players lining up to play these events. So why should they listen to a no-view commentator like me? Because it's part of the drinking game of the show, that's why. You have no idea how difficult it is to not just want to roll footage from the old paintball days and take people from the gaming industry, stick their faces on the monitor, and just scream at them to learn. Gaming is doing the exact same thing that I've already watched paintball do. And look where paintball is now. This is one article from 2014 that outlines the thing pretty well, if not with some inaccuracies. Participation has been declining in paintball, fields have been shutting down, and new players and old-timers are just leaving. The reasons might actually sound familiar to gamers. Too expensive, too time-consuming, the fact that new players get thrown to the wolves and get seal clubbed. Yeah, in the end, paintball didn't do what it takes to be a sport. You know, they did big money tournaments, events in public locations, they had crazy personalities, it was all flash and no substance. More importantly, nothing was there that is actually a sport. It remained as an oddity, barely a sideshow. In order to become a sport these days, you gotta... Okay, look, I'll just be frank here. It requires doing things that gamers are just not prepared to do right now. Things like, conforming and change and responsibility. Yeah, those three things kind of throw it out the window, hence the asterisk. You see, gaming has to kind of take cues from other modern sports. To get what I mean, you gotta look at the new Olympic sports that have been added in recent years. Snowboarding, BMX and mountain biking, triathlon, beach volleyball. A lot of these sports only began to exist in my lifetime, and they've gotten to an international stage. Most of them managed to do this by demonstrating they weren't just a flash in the pan and by cleaning up their own houses. I can only really speak for snowboarding because that was something that I lived through. To give you an idea, when I was going to college, I remember calling every ski hill in a 100-mile radius and saying, "Do you allow snowboards?" Now this was a legitimate question because only 2 ski hills at the time did. The perception was that snowboarders were bad for business. Okay, that seems really laughable now, but at the time, that's what they thought. It took some years and a lot of cleanup within our own ranks, but we shook that image. Skateboarding, it was kind of the same way. If you think gamers have a bad rep, now imagine being harassed by the cops for walking down the street holding a laptop because you might start gaming. You see, this is why that skate park in the middle of Wisconsin impresses me so much, because in my youth, this would have never happened. But it's taken some time, but enough people have seen the merits of skateboarding as a sport. Enough so that a government-funded skateboarding facility exists in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin. That's the power of sport. It changes attitudes. Which leads me to the poker argument. A lot of people brought that up in the last video, but professional poker is actually a perfect case study in how to make something into a sport. First of all, poker has the history. Now, we could argue it goes back to the late 16th century, but modern poker has decades of history behind it. History that's littered with, bodies. But when most people think of modern poker, they probably think of World Series of Poker that they see on TV. And here's where things get brilliant. World Series of Poker does not own poker. They run the largest tournament, yes, but they don't own the rights to Texas Hold'em. This means you can play it anywhere from your kitchen table to an online service to an army barracks in the middle of Kazakhstan without having to check in first. With this widespread player base, you have an informed audience who sees the activity as normal and, dare I even say, traditional. Okay, I'm talking about tradition here. Okay, let me sidetrack for just a second here. Sports have a lot of tradition behind them. For example, I live in America. Thank you, Captain Obvious. I would be hard-pressed to find anyone in America not affected by baseball. Within my own family, my dad played stickball in New York. My mom was a Cubs fan. They played some Little League myself. My brother-in-law played some Little League, and now he's a memorabilia collector. My nephew's in South Carolina for a tournament this week. Yeah, baby! Point is, it's sort of a tradition thing. It's what every generation passes down to the next generation. It's what kids do with their parents, and then those kids eventually do it with their kids. It's a really powerful thing. It's also kind of the reason why, while wearing this hoodie in Wisconsin, somebody wanted to fight me. True story. Alright. Back to poker. As a sport, poker is doing it right. The game itself is kind of confusing to watch as a layman, but you'll notice what they do for television. They give the audience enough information to understand what's going on. I mean, here, take a look at this still. The players' names are displayed in order. We get to see all the players' cards, but we know the other players on the table can't, so we have the advantage. They put a win percentage next to each hand, as well as the current wager and total pot. And as the cards are dealt, well, those appear on the screen too. Now, let's compare that to League of Legends. What the hell am I even looking at? For a layman, this is graphical gibberish. Okay, I might know some of the lingo, so I can see hit points and maybe spells, and I'm guessing pets, and there's a scoreboard, and there's a timer, but if you play League of Legends, you are now screaming at your monitor everything that's going on. But for people who don't play, they're going to look at this, get confused, and change the channel. And I'm not even going to get into what Super Smash Bros. Is like to a layman. Now, of course, people are going to argue that there are commentators who tell you what's going on, but I'd like to introduce you to something I call the bar test. I want you to imagine that you've got a competitive League of Legends game going on in a sports bar where you can't hear the audio. Could you look at the screen, figure out what's happening, and then get pulled into the match without being told what's happening? If you're a gamer, probably. If you're John Q. Public, probably not. In summing up, what did poker exactly do? Well, they cleaned up their image, they decentralized the game, they focused coverage to make it accessible to the first-time viewer, they focused on the personalities in their game and color commentary, and they altered their game slightly to make it more audience-friendly. Or in gaming terms, they nerfed it. Okay, yeah, sure, there's going to be a whole bunch of people who long for the old days of poker when it was more rough and tumble and more exclusive, but you know, by embracing the sports side of things, popularity of poker has exploded. And it doesn't hurt that the price of admission is one deck of cards. There's a concept here that's very vital to understand, and that is that a game is for the players, a sport is for the audience. If a casual observer can't understand why what you're doing is so cool, they're not going to think that it's cool. At best, they're going to watch for a while and go, huh, that's a thing, and leave. So if that means that you modify the game so that the audience can see what you can see as a player, be prepared to do that. And I'm not even talking about cleaning up our own house here. If any of these things happen in mainstream sports, that sport would be rightfully eviscerated. Sports are played on the big stage in front of the world. You better get used to living under a microscope. Which brings me to one more uncomfortable thing that needs to be discussed. Esports needs to work. There are hundreds of sports that have failed, even if they've been on TV, even if they had money backing them up, even if they got a lot of press yeah, they're actually hitting each other with tasers as part of their game. They claim they're a legit league. In either case, they were all pretty much destined to fail from the beginning. Now, in the case of the XFL, most people were tuned into it and they were expecting a circus, like a pro wrestling for football. And they were just waiting for it to fail. And when it did, they just smugly said, "I told you so." Any football-style game that wants to launch now is going to have to overcome that stigma. It just kind of seemed to the fans that they weren't taking themselves seriously, so why should the fans take them seriously? Not taking yourself seriously can lead to failure. Well, so can being too confusing and exclusive, being too much like a sport that exists but extreme, and being too WTF-ish. Literally, it's just all flash. Or we could go the other route, be a TV oddity. This is from an 80s TV show called That's Incredible, where competitive video gameplay was on the same show as a water skiing horse. Yeah, if the goal is just to get on TV, then yeah, that's doable at the cost of our dignity. Do it right, that's going to take a lot of work. But the rewards, the rewards would be so worth it. I want you to imagine for a moment a company like Nike. Let's say that they were to dump even just 10% of their football budget into gaming. What could they come up with for us? Or how about a company like PepsiCo? They own Gatorade. What if Gatorade were to make a gaming-specific energy drink? Or how about if you could go with your friends and have like a bar league to go raiding? These are the kind of things that make it worth doing. But we're not going to get there overnight. This is the biggest mistake I see esports doing. They're trying to make a huge splash with big money tournaments rather than trying to build the fan infrastructure where it's needed. Imagine they took, $2 million off the prize pool at the International. They opened up esports facilities in major cities worldwide to bring it to the people. What if they could show value in esports to casual observers who could then in turn spread the word about them? Esports are in a unique position in that it's early enough to make changes in their sports and in the attitudes of casual observers, but it starts within ourselves. We really need to clean up our own house, get rid of the toxic players and the scandals, and then play to our strengths. And yeah, that's going to mean growing up a little bit. That means change. And it's not going to be easy, but the rewards are worth it. I want to leave you people with one thought about this, because a lot of people made this argument to me. They said it was not fair of me to compare esports to physical sport because they were so completely different. If you're going to call yourself a sport, you have to accept everything that goes along with that label, including being compared to other legitimized sports. And honestly, if the ego of esports and their fans is so easily bruised by an internet commentator who gets no views, imagine what's going to happen when somebody like Sports Illustrated thrashes it without mercy. Actually, there is one more thing I want to kind of leave you guys with. Rob Pardo, who was on the World of Warcraft team for a long time, he's saying that gaming should be an Olympic sport. Yeah. If you guys want me to eviscerate that, I'll be more than happy to do so. Leave a comment down below. But in the short term, you are not prepared.